Hello, and welcome back to Tiny Artist TV. Today is the third group in our series of Orctober costume videos. I'm gonna do something a little different for the intro here, just for the sake of time, because I am trying to keep these videos relatively short. I know 15 minutes is still long, but I'm doing multiple drawings in one video. What do you want? So I actually went ahead and rolled this next group ahead of time, so I am going to go ahead and tell you what costumes I'm going to be drawing. Of course, you still won't know the color palette, but maybe it'll give you something to look forward to. So for this group, we have a frail zombie, we have a depressed vampire, we have an unnerving dancer, and we have a gruesome tavern tender. So let's go ahead and get started. So while this particular prompt didn't necessarily read frail by the end of it, my first thought was, what does a frail zombie, or what would a frail orc zombie look like? And I thought of a grandmother type figure, because when you think of frail, or at least when I do, I tend to think of old people, because they're usually, you know, a little brittle in the bones. Particularly this one, she's definitely seen some winters. And this grandmother type figure decided to dress up as a zombie to have some fun and scare her grandkids. That's pretty much the story behind this one. I don't necessarily have a story for all of my characters, but sometimes something just comes out as I'm working on them. The line art in this one came out a little bit grittier, and I felt that that was fine because it's a zombie, and zombies are usually depicted as being kind of like gaunt and gravelly and a little bit dark and dirty. So for this one, I really wanted to push that emaciated look that zombies typically have, like accentuating the bones in her fingers and all of the wrinkles in her face. And then, even though I do still do multiply layer shading, as you can see here, I went a little ham with the line art and kind of pulled in my traditional graphic style of just heavy shadowed, like etching line art. And I feel, again, that really adds to the overall feeling of this being a darker costume, but still with the color palette. The color palette, interestingly enough, really worked out well for this. So on my shuffler, it's called Beach Party. Obviously, this zombie is not going to a beach party anytime soon, but the colors were earthy and gritty enough to work with this particular costume, and still gave that kind of traditional feeling of this is an orc zombie who was just an everyday commoner who was brought back to life by like necromancy or something. So the brighter colors didn't take away from the overall feel of it, and I really liked that. So here we have the end of our first prompt, our frail zombie. I almost said frail grandma. Frail zombie. Prompt number 2 for this group, the depressed vampire. It's here. It's drawn. I got it done. But I was working on this one after having been at work for a very physically demanding 8 hours. And instead of resting, I decided to just power through and put something on the page. Did it get done? Yes. Am I happy with it? Not really. I feel like this would fit better in with group 1 because group 1 was kind of more of warming up to drawing every day again. Whereas style-wise, this is definitely the weakest of the 4 prompts that are in this video. And so I actually decided to, even though I am showing the process, all of the process for this one, kind of scrap it and just do another one. Hey, tiny artist from the future here. I tried redrawing this prompt, didn't work out, so we're stuck with this one. Better, because I know I can do better. And again, I know I was just really tired this day and my focus was all over the place. The lines are fine. I'm happy with the pose actually, but for some reason my brain just could not put this palette together in a pleasing way. So in the redraw, my main focus was to make the pose a little more dramatic instead of this kind of slumped over ennui, even though it's supposed to be a depressed vampire. It's not very interesting to look at in my opinion, which is like, you're your own worst critic, but that's how you grow, right? Make the pose more dynamic and dramatic, and then do something better with this color palette. It's very Christmassy. My main goal, however, was originally to make the greens a lot darker and then to do a bunch of embroidery and designs in those colors. But that didn't happen, so here we have prompt number 2 from this group, the depressed vampire. Number 3, the unnerving dancer. This one, I guess this is kind of where it diverged from being costumes into me just drawing orc culture. So my husband and I are both writers. Even though no one's really reading our stuff at the moment, we're still writing like all the time. And we have this huge world that we've created. And I decided that while figuring out the pose and the costume for this dancer, that this would be a Dirixie summoner. So again, taking it from being just a costume to implementing some of the crazy amount of world building we've been doing. So a Dirixie summoner is basically, in this case, a dancer. Not so much a bard as she is a sorcerer, which I guess bards technically are sorcerers, but they're classified differently. Anyway, pardon my tangent. Is a summoner who dances at these Dirixie rituals for blood sacrifices to the blood elk. There's no way to mince words about that. There are definitely darker parts of the world that we've created, and this is one of them, which is perfect for the prompt being an unnerving dancer. When you see these dancers, you're not necessarily supposed to be excited about their presence because their presence means that somebody's gonna die. So working with this color palette was wonderful. I didn't even really need to edit it too much. Like in some of the other ones, I make colors lighter or darker to kind of compensate for particularly weird colors that have been joined together, or trying to choose what elements to emphasize. This color palette just worked. And it's funny because the color palette's name is Esmeralda, which, if you're familiar with the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Esmeralda, the Romani, she was a dancer, so it just all, again, just worked together. As far as trying to make the pose unnerving, that was a little I won't say difficult, because the original pose I had chosen was very contortionist. But then I decided to flip the pose and it became a little more elegant. And so to push back some of the creep factor, I add her actually casting a necrotic spell. So here we have our unnerving Dirixie dancer. Number 4. Number 4 is the gruesome tavern tender. Okay, so character-wise, this one is my favorite out of the batch. Concept-wise, I think the Dirixie dancer was the strongest. Overall line and execution, I think the frail zombie was the best. But getting back into the drawing, so you can see this one kind of came pretty easily to me because I had in my mind that I want this to be kind of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre like vibe to it, and of course based on my references here, I actually did have to Google gruesome because I couldn't initially decide like how dark and gory I wanted to go. My artwork isn't typically very like, I don't do horror artwork. I do more creepy stuff than just outright blood and gore. So I have my blood and gore on the screen to keep myself on track with what the overall feeling and aesthetic is supposed to be for this character. I think I did okay. I did definitely tame it down a little bit, decapitated head aside, but for as far as how dark this one went compared to the other ones, it still feels kind of whimsical, especially since he doesn't look like, he definitely looks threatening. Kind of looks like an orc version of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, quite honestly. But there's just something about the overall vibe of it, even minus the color palette. The color palette helps make it feel a little more dark and dingy, and after I do the lighting and the shading, it just all comes together, and I couldn't help but describe this as buttery. But I didn't go as heavy on the gore as I probably could have, and part of that's just personal comfort level. Like, I could definitely do tasteless like buckets of corn syrup gore here and there, but I figured for him to be gruesome, it was enough that he's missing an eye, he's got this huge scar on his shoulder, he's missing a tusk, he's missing an ear, he's just cut off somebody's head because they asked for the manager. Little did they know that the knife's name is the manager. So there is, again, this kind of dark whimsy about it, and this one ended up being my favorite for overall character concept. So as I'm doing the finishing touches on the lighting, I hope you can see what I mean about it just pulling it together and making it look like a dark, dingy, seedy, like, bar that you may or may not want to stay in for too long. So here's our gruesome tavern tender, and that brings us to the end of our 4th video, days 11 through 14. Again, I hope you guys continue to enjoy this series. I'm really having an enjoyable time pushing myself to think about basically character design, which is good because I have another character design heavy project in the works right now, so this is helping me solidify a style before I dip too far into the deep end. Anyway, that's today's video. I will see you guys next time. Until then, have a weird day.